also, I have story. Well, actually, I'll go on to that too because there's also the story that I'm of my dad's. Mostly because I had my other story. Well, I have multiple stories, but the one I was going to work on needs to be scanned in. Then it needs to be converted from gibberish to English, and then edited from there. So that's just too much. But there's other story that my there's this other story I came across. Mostly it's my daughter's fault. Um, my dad gave her the story to read, and she wanted to get the next story in the series. I don't really know if there is. I still have to figure it out. But this one's called Talisman of the Winds, and it's really interesting. Um, as I'm looking at these stories, I know that he did a lot of research on them, and on the first layer, you're like, oh well, he just wrote some really cool fantasy stories. But then if you look at it, and I'm kind of lucky that I was brought up the way I was because I've been able to kind of pull things apart. But given that he's done a lot of research, the story is actually a fantasy, and it looks like it's based on some Malaysian characters. So there's a Malaysian-based fantasy. They're dealing with some weird weapons that aren't common. They aren't your regular European weapons. They are more Malaysian. My geography is horrible, but I do know that I've googled I've done some research on some of the stuff. Some of the terms that he's using are actually from there, and also Indonesian. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. I'm a bad person. I realize this, but it's interesting. I mean, this one is basically a story about a man, and he is just sort of wandering about the square, and he gets jumped by some people. A wizard helps him out, and then later on the wizard asks for a favor, and he is tasked with delivering a talisman somewhere. However, until he actually delivers it, he can't physically get rid of it. He can put it from one hand to the other hand, but he actually physically cannot get rid of this talisman until he delivers it to where it needs to go. That's what I've deemed so far from it. I need to finish reading the story, but that is pretty interesting in and of itself. I don't know. Maybe that's what I'll start doing. I kind of want to do a little more Twitch streaming. Maybe just do a little bit of reading every night because I need to practice anyway, and it'd be kind of neat to just sort of read bits of the story as I go. It'll probably take a long time for me to read through all this, but what's the worst that could happen? So this is called Talisman of the Winds. And here I am with me realizing, like any good reader does, is that sometimes you're able to read more than you're able to talk. So bear with me on this. I'm going to be butchering things right, left, and center. Just remember that it's cool. Okay. Chapter 1. The City of Saragosse. What might have happened, thought Gull wondered later, if the storyteller had been better at his craft. An old man, and therefore one would assume experienced man, and yet he was making the tale of the uncouth peasant sound mundane. How could a storyteller live to earn those wrinkles, the sparse hair, the bald crown, the gray beard, and yet be unable to communicate the excitement the story demanded? The market square of Saragosse swirled around them. Tradesmen, stall keepers, water sellers, beggars. In an eddy beneath the majestic statue of Thogar Peacemaker, the storyteller stood and chanted, while occasionally one or another of the crowd tossed a small coin in the direction of the bowl at his feet. There was even, Wardash Garden Guide, a silver coin among the coppers. That, thought Galgast, had been put there by the storyteller himself, a suggestion that he could actually tell a story to someone's satisfaction. Thakal pushed his way through the crowd. As befit the status of Saragosse as a major trading city, they were a widely varied lot. Local men tended to slenderness and wore mostly trousers and tunic and a round cloth hat. There were black-bearded Tarakans, hooded Kundalini, bandy-legged Zoltani who were looking out of place without their ponies under them. There were others, too, that Thakal could not place. There were even a few of his own folk, the Batan, indistinguishable by long dark hair pulled back and tied at the back of their heads. He knew none of them, of course. Batanji was a large country. None carried an ox goad such as his, either. It was about 3 foot long, thrust through 2 hoops that hung from his sash, point upward with a thumb-sized hook just below the point. He slid his way through the crowd and approached one of the stalls where he bought a skewer of spiced pork at a price which his first taste revealed to be a bit higher than was merited. He continued to wander around the market square, and young Nadan had paid the whole train off, and it would be at least another week before Thakal had to look for work somewhere else. Longer if he had good luck with the dwarves' bones, or maybe less, he was honest enough to admit, if the bones nipped his fingers. As he approached the alley mouth, he heard the sound of blows on flesh, along with nasty laughter and what sounded like jeering, though he couldn't understand the language. Intent on staying out of trouble, he stepped wide around the alley mouth, glancing down to make sure that the trouble wouldn't spill over. What was happening was that 3 Zotani were kicking an invalid around. It originally says crippled, but that's not. My father was born in 1945, and those were different times, so I have to try and figure out, although this is where I'm going to break down a bit, because it's a word I have a problem with. It just says cripple, and I don't know if I should be using that term or if I should kind of go with a different phrasing. I'm going to say invalid, because we go on later to say that he does have, he is lame, as in he has difficulty walking. He knew a bit about the Zotani customs and beliefs. According to them, any person with a disability was under the curse of the gods, and therefore fair game for any kind of abuse. He further knew that philosophers in many lands spoke of the necessity for those better off to help the poor and downtrodden. There was little justice anywhere for any poor or downtrodden. 3 to 1, best stay out of it. But even as he admonished himself, he stepped into the alley and delivered a healthy boot to a loose-trousered Zotani behind him. I haven't mentioned. The plainsman staggered forward, tripped over the invalid in front of him, and went sprawling into the alley muck. The other 2 turned shaggy faces on him, one demanding, "What doing, stinkhouse dwelling, horse dropping?" Thakal shrugged, holding his arms wide. "I thought we were going to play kick in the butt. Was it a private game then? You making mock of real people, awful? Don't call me that. I'm not your mother. He watched as the plainsman translated his response, realized what had been said, and then reached for his sword. Oh, the game's changed to swinging sharp pieces of metal then? He pulled the ox goad out of its loops and held it up at an awkward angle. You fighting me with pointed stick? Zotani demanded, disgust in his heavy voice. All I've got at the moment. If you're afraid, we can call it off. So the Zotani snarled and charged. The awkwardly held stick suddenly danced lightly in Thoughtful's hand. Whipping up and over it, slapped down the downswinging Zotani sword aside, then continued its circular motion up by Thougful's left shoulder, from which he struck backhand off as the off-balanced plainsman went staggering by. The man dropped and lay still. The man Thoughtful had first kicked was up now. He and his companion advanced side by side, carefully, having seen the goad in action against someone too enraged to remember any skill. Thoughtful took a step sideways, as if in an attempt to deal with one of the plainsmen first, and slipped in the alley muck, almost going down on one knee. The nearest Zotani shouted in triumph, lifting his sword, but his shout turned to a groan as the point of the ox goad took him in the stomach. Thoughtful came to his feet with a speed that demonstrated that his stumble had been a ruse, and batted aside a tentative cut of the third man's sword. Then something blunt hit him in the left knee, causing him to stumble for real. But the Zotani was prevented from taking any advantage by a pair of spear points that hovered 6 inches from his chest. Fierce flying pig guts! Thoughtful swore, pulling the reactive backswing of his weapon, then stopped for a moment. He took a breath and said, I'm getting up. No trouble. Bet not no trouble, said a horribly accented voice from behind him, verifying what the shape of the spearhead told him. City Watch. Carefully he regained his feet and looked around. I'll put the stick away, all right? Only a suicidal fool would do anything else. With the 2 spear points poised for a thrust that would likely be quicker than any move he was likely to be able to make. Carefully he slipped the ox goad in its loops. Now he was able to have a more careful look. Love of Wardish, a short one! Yes, the patrol chief, smacking his ivory-sheathed baton into the palm of his left hand. Barely came up to... Sorry, let me redo that. Yes, the patrol chief, smacking his baton into the palm of his left hand, barely came up to Thoughtful's shoulder. And wholesome short people did seem to rise above their lack of height. He found altogether too many of them in positions of minor authority such as this, and using that authority as a club. And that habitual gesture with the baton did not bode well. The patrol chief looked at the Zotani, still standing. I say you take anything valuable off friends, corpses, and go. Will the go still living? The chief cast a brief look at the downed plainsman. Willigo has gut wound. Got long hard death. Or maybe you have shaman close by can do something? After a short staring match with the patrol chief, the last Zotani knelt by the bodies, removed several things, a bit of jewelry, a few coins, and a pair of strange objects, apparently made of leather, wood, and feathers, tied into a small bundle with a cord of leather. These he tucked into his sash. Then he knelt beside Willigo once more, and in a quick movement pulled a small knife from his boot and cut Willigo's throat. He wiped the knife off his friend's shirt and returned it to his boot, then stood staring defiantly at the patrol chief. The chief only grunted. Huh, off with you now. The Zotani stepped toward Thoughtful to find a pair of spear points blocking his way. He stared at the baton and then said, Seeing your face, seeing your track. He moved carefully past the watch and out of the alley. The patrol chief turned his attention to Thoughtful. Most noble magistrate, he not likes people brawling and killing each other in alleys of his fine city. He likes murderers hanging from rope. Thoughtful had had a fair notion of the way things were likely to go from the time the watch had first intervened. The invalid who had been the cause of it all had disappeared around the corner when Thoughtful and Zotani were concentrating on each other, and his staying or going didn't matter. The watch were not looking for anyone to bring before the magistrates. Otherwise they would have brought the Zotani as well. But Thoughtful couldn't be too blunt about things, otherwise the little patrol chief might just decide to save the magistrate the trouble, the bother of the rope and all. Is it really necessary to trouble the magistrate? The patrol chief thumped his baton against his own chest. I be the one who go to magistrate, what not? I, you understand, foreign cow chaser? Perfectly, Captain. To give the chief a slightly inflated rank might help, or it might make things worse. The chief smiled a twisted little smile. It worth something to you not to go to magistrate? Suppose we say a copper piece to each of your men and 3 to yourself, Captain. The chief stiffened. That much we get, stab you, leave you beside friends here. Maybe you say 5 silver piece for me, 1 to each man? In any other bargaining session, Thoughtful would use gesticulations and insults, but it was clear that the patrol chief would need little incentive to kill him here and rob his body. Finally, at the rate of 1 silver to the chief and 2 coppers to each of his men, the agreement was finally made. The watch went off with their money, leaving Thoughtful so light of purse that he would need to find a hire fairly soon. If I eat small and drink small and the bones don't nip my fingers too badly, I might just have time for a rest, he muttered at the flattened purse in his hand. Someone behind him cleared their throat. In an instant, Thoughtful had whirled, and the ox goad was in his hand. The man was standing a discreet distance away. Flat fur hat, grey trousers and tunic, with the amulet of a thawed wizard round his neck. Thoughtful relaxed, but only a bit. Thawed wizards were not known to be dangerous, save in one of their causes, but he had not reached this age by taking things at face value. You handle yourself well, declared the magician, not only with that weapon of yours, but knowing when the odds are against you too. Flatter me all you want, wizard. I can't afford even the smallest charm you might have for sale. He just wanted to get away and drink something. Thawed wizards are not known for selling love charms and the sorts of things bizarre wizards dealt in. The wizard refused to be insulted. He continued to smile and said, I saw the beginning of the matter and the reason for it. The watch, being the watch, wouldn't have cared if they had seen. I, however, appreciated what you did and why you did it. Still, only wanting to get away and doing some serious drinking, Thoughtful demanded, do you appreciate it enough to pay back what the watch took from me? I do have a proposition for you. If you would allow me to buy you a cup of wine while I explain it? Thoughtful gave him a suspicious look. A proposition, is it? And what does this proposition require of me? The wizard clucked his tongue. I'd rather not talk my business out here in an alley. If we go to a wine shop, I can at least promise you a cup of wine, whether or not you accept my offer. Now, said the magician, once they were seated in the wine shop with cups, fairly good wine in front of them, I'm known as Herzorio, and before you answer that, you have never heard of me. That you have never heard of me. Let me assure you, that I prefer few people know about me. And my name is Thoughtful, an ox driver by trade, and I still fail to see what a Thard wizard might have to do with me. Oh, you know something of the Thard wizards then? What is it you think you know? It seems from what I've heard, you've involved yourselves in causes of one sort or another, mostly to do with what you call natural justice, and woe to the person that stands between you and the achievement to that end. Rosario frowned and leaned back, took a sip of wine, and then said, "A somewhat simplified view of matters, and not all of us are so ruthless as you make us out, though I'm not entirely surprised we have such a reputation. The definition of natural justice, for instance, tends to be a slippery one, and too often the man judging the situation has insufficient data to work from. Even in the case of the most thorough information, the most thoroughly experienced wizard is still a man prone to making judgments, or according to his own experience. Rather than any philosophical abstractions, mostly we try to do the best for the greatest number, and I would hope that overall we do more good than ill." Thoughtful nodded. "Well, I just got finished dispensing some natural justice back there, and all it got me was the honor of paying a supreme bribe to the little patrol chief, and a further distinction of having the Zotani clan swear vengeance on me. That last means I have to go out of Saragos by the day after tomorrow, putting a bit of pressure on my hiring on. I might have to take a hire from someone I would rather not prefer to not know. No, I think I'll leave justice, natural or otherwise, to other people for a while. You still haven't finished your wine. Do me the favor of listening to my proposal. Then after that, if it's still not to your liking, you can go, with no ill feelings on either side." Thoughtful smiled. "As you say, there's still wine in my cup. Go ahead." "The truth of the matter is," Rosario said, "we of the Thard sect have a reputation which puts us at odds with nearly every ruler in the world. As a matter of fact, I am using a good deal of my energy at the moment, purely to prevent anyone else from seeing me as you see me. But there are certain despots that do well to fear us. What do you know of the land of Wenzaskos, that it's said to be hell on earth?" "Indeed. Unless you happen to be pure-blood Wens." Memories of rumors and campfire tales shook free in Thockel's mind. "You want me to go up against the heirs of the bloody Narnash?" He began to stand. Rosario waved him back to his seat again. "Don't be a fool. I admire your skill, but I have no desire to make some kind of heroic battle leader out of you. I only desire you to make a delivery for me." How simply he puts it. "Make a delivery," he says, as though making a delivery will not put me in the same position as one who raises a war banner against Narash III. Wizard's brow wrinkled in a slight frown. "You insist that I intend to send you into the jaws of Mokur Deathlord. You will have all the help I can give you to deliver the item and remain unnoticed, leaving Wenzaskos as unmarked as you came. Depending on how you move, you could be halfway across the continent before the king discovers you had delivered anything, by which time he'd be much too busy to send agents after you. And that's Narash IV, by the way. Sorry, whatever the number, be it 4 or 400, I'm determined not to let myself get drawn into other people's quarrels for at least a year or two." Thockel stood. "One moment." The wizard pushed over a silver coin across the table toward him. "For your time. Go ahead. Take it. It has no spells on it that will turn you into my mindless slave or any such." Thockel picked up the coin. It was a little old, bearing the features of Thogor peacemaker, but still legal coinage. He balanced it in his hand. You pay well for my time. If it changes your mind, the offer's still open. No, but thank you. It wasn't that he disbelieved the wizard about spells on the coin, but just to be on the safe side, before he left, he took it to the counter of the wine shop and had it exchanged for its equivalent in copper. When he looked back at the table, he had vacated it as empty, but he knew that Osorio had not walked past him. He shrugged. Wizards. Okay, so that was the end of chapter 1. I think I'm just going to probably just do a chapter a night, because now I'm kind of in the mood for doing some editing, and as I read it, I mean, you heard me stumble. You may not have heard me stumble, but yeah, I think I'm just going to do more reading until everything feels better. Just continue reading and editing, and then eventually this will actually be a book. I mean, it's already a book technically, but it'll be a book that everyone can read online and in hard copy, because I'm big on that. So yeah, I guess we'll see. I'm gonna try and do this every night. It seems like not a bad thing. I can just turn this on for an hour or so, read a chapter, then go about my business. So that's probably what I'm going to do for the next little while. I'll let you know as I know. Ideally, I'll get back into the D&D game. I have to remember the D&D game. I have to do some watching of old videos of it to see where I am. But I guess we'll talk to you all again soon. So until next time, Beth signing off.